What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 14 of Into the Necrosphere. My guest on today's show is going to be Conor Droney, who is the co-founder and co-owner of Apocalyptic Witchcraft Records. That is a label that I've spoken about on this very podcast many times, and with good reason. I think they put out a consistently awesome stream of music, including things like Crimson Throne, Hyena, the Antichrist Imperium, just to name a few. And I thought it would be fun to have somebody talk to us about the industry, about how he got started in the industry, and also about what it is like peddling the devil's music for a living in 2019. So that conversation is coming up in just a few minutes. I actually just want to say one thing about it as well. Conor is in a really awesome band called From the Bogs of Ogiska, I believe is the pronunciation. But we didn't get much time to talk about it on today's conversation. I wanted to keep it very focused on the record label, but I will have him on again in the future to talk about it. In the meantime, definitely check them out, and I will include one of their songs during the conversation as well, so you can hear what they sound like if you don't know them. Also, just a quick reminder that if you like the show and you want to show some love and support, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Or if you're listening to this on iTunes or any of the other fine podcasting platforms that host us, then please subscribe and leave me a 5-star review if the spirit moves you to do so, because that really helps me. Also, after the conversation, I'm going to be talking about the new Cattle Decapitation and the new Strigoi albums. For some bizarre reason, there seems to be a couple of folk online who have taken it upon themselves to try and run the new Cattle Decapitation into the ground as much as they can. Are the criticisms justified? Stay tuned and find out. In the meantime, let us get this fucking show on the road. Your So, Conor, welcome to Into the Necrosphere. You and I chatted a couple of minutes ago before we ran into some technical gremlins. But I think as anybody who's listened to the show for any period of time knows, I'm a very big fan of the label. I'm a very big fan of the bands on the label. So I'm really psyched to have you on the show, talking about how this label got started, your background and your history of working in the music industry, but we're also keen to get your thoughts on, or your candid views on what it's like running a label like this in 2019. So, starting at the beginning, tell me a bit about your sort of your background, how you got involved in music, and how it came to be that you founded Apocalyptic Witchcraft.
Well, originally I'm from the west of Ireland, and growing up, you couldn't really find extreme music or anything heavy in general. And there used to be a radio show called The John Kenny Show on a Sunday night, so I kind of discovered music that way. But because I didn't have any older siblings or friends into heavy music or metal, I kind of went straight into deep end. So I kind of missed all the classic rock stuff and started listening to bands like The Berserker and Napalm Death before discovering Black Sabbath. And when I was about 17, I released my first record, which was on Human Jigsaw Records, a name I've kind of used over the years. And it was a more electronical style record by a guy from Northern Ireland called Flak Jacket. And at the time, I hadn't a clue what I was doing. Distribution was something that, is kind of impossible to get at the time. Didn't know what barcodes were. Artwork was just a different world, but I still managed to do it. And this is before... Here's a company in the Czech Republic, and this obviously before they were in the EU, so obviously you had to deal with loads of customs and paperwork and stuff that a 17-year-old doesn't have a clue about. But it kind of scared me, but at the same time it made me intrigued about how the music industry worked. And then after that, I studied sound and video technology in Limerick. I did that for 2 years. I left before I did the degree because I didn't feel like I was learning anything and was probably partying too much. And then I went to Nottingham in England, where I did work experience with EREC. I didn't know anyone when I went there originally. I arrived with a bag on my back. I kind of wanted to see what happens. And after 2 months, I got work experience. Ended up getting a full-time job doing their digital side of things. And it's kind of right place, right time, because digital was just about starting there. And Eric being kind of a forward-thinking label, they always kind of were a few years ahead of everyone else when it came to anything technical. But they were usually kind of too far ahead, where by the time people got on board, they were out, had finished it, or it just hadn't worked out. For instance, while I was working there, I did a soundtrack. I compiled a soundtrack for a computer game they worked on. And that was good for years before metal labels got on board and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. What was the game again? Because I'm
it was the Metal Racing or something like that.
Yeah, I was about to say, it was like on the tip of my tongue, because I remember when that happened. So it was you that did the soundtrack for that?
Yeah, I compiled it. It was one of the jobs I did. Extreme Metal Racing, that was it.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned earlier that the bands that you got into first when you got into metal was Napalm Death, the Berserker. I mean, and those bands were, they were all Earache bands. So it must have been quite something for you to join a label where all these bands that you were into were signed to.
Oh, it was a dream going through. I mean, in the less than 2 years I was there, I worked on albums by Akakocker, Cult of Luna, The Berserker, The Decapitated. And these are all albums that would be considered, probably in the last 15 years, some of the best extreme music to come out. So it was kind of interesting to see stuff from the ground up, and how it just goes from just getting a demo through to, being out there and considered classics in this day and age. But it was also really cool to meet these people from all over the world that had similar tastes in music, because where I came from, it was just odd that, people just aren't into extreme music. So I find it really odd still that people were into the same kind of stuff, same bracket I was.
You mentioned Akakocker, and I remember the outcry, and also I think it was BBC Newsnight, the interview or the debate between Jason and David from Akakocker.
Oh yeah.
And I think it was like some Catholic league or something like that was saying that they didn't want them in the country. That's not kind of a similar area to where you were from, or? No,
I'm from the West Coast.
All right, okay. But would you say the sentiment where you're from is quite similar to the gang that was on that interview?
Not really, because where I'm from, it's more. I suppose it's more cosmopolitan, even though it's a small village, but it's very tourist. So growing up, I had a lot of friends from lots of different nationalities and around the world. So religion didn't really have much of a hold on me, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where I'm from in South Africa, I can tell you now it's very, very different. I think a couple of years ago, Rotting Christ played in South Africa, and as far as I can recall, I think they had to refer to themselves as the Rotting.
Okay.
They weren't allowed to call themselves Rotting Christ. And I mean, I can only imagine, especially in kind of, 2006, 2007, when that Akakocker incident happened, I can only imagine what the response would have been like in South Africa.
Yeah.
They shown up there supporting, an album called Antichrist.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But while you were at Earache, what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned, and also, I guess some of the things that for you were most eye-opening about what you thought the industry was going to be like versus what it turned out to be like?
The first album I actually worked on was Edema, the record that Earache got slated at the time, but just to see what kind of figures a band like that did compared to, say, the more underground stuff. That was quite interesting. Also worked on Mortis record, which had the wrong barcode, so that involved a lot of staff having to redo the barcode. So from an artistic point of view, that's always something I've always had to check or make sure, because just the amount of pain that goes involved if someone fucks it up. So it's not worth getting things like that wrong. So I suppose making sure every little detail is correct. There's so many little things. It's just general that you wouldn't consider, like making sure you have a cool catalog number that works, like for instance Earache have the Mosh, whatever. A lot of little things like that, which you wouldn't even consider before I got into music. I mean, I've been a music collector for a long time, so it's kind of cool to see how things go from just getting a demo through to the full finished product.
Yeah. And anything or any particularly difficult, and you don't have to name them if you don't want to, but any particular difficult characters or people that surprised you by how easy they were to deal with?
I found the more extreme the artist, the nicer they usually are. That's all. I mean, I've worked with some absolute people who can be considered lunatics, or just generally they have a bad aura about them, apparently, if you read the press, but you meet them in person and they're just normal, adult people. I mean, a lot of the people I've become friends with over the years are in very extreme metal bands and they're just normal. But Usually the worst people are the people you consider to be, you wouldn't expect it from them when they come around. And, you can deal with a lot of two-faced people in the music industry, which isn't good either.
Yeah. And it's, it's funny you mentioned that, because I had a similar conversation with someone a couple of years ago. When I was writing for Chronicles of Chaos, and I was writing for Metal Rules, I think the exactly like you just said now, the biggest surprise to me was everyone that originally I thought this guy's going to be a psycho, he's going to be off his rocker. They all turned out to be the nicest guys. And the people that you many of the people that you expect are going to be the guys that are cool and relaxed and you can hang out with, they were complete pricks. And one of them, again, and I won't mention the name, but I'll give the hint and say he is a member of one of the big four. I went out to dinner with him, and I've been a fan of the band for such a long time, and I was so excited about getting to kind of spend time with someone who was a hero of mine growing up, like that, and it was fucking unbearable. Whereas conversely, I mentioned Rotting Christ before. I've become friends with Jason and Akrakoka, and I've no qualms in saying it. The first time I met him was back in 2006, and I was genuinely quite intimidated. I was like, because he still had the long hair and wore the suits, and he had quite a stern demeanor about him. And then obviously, when you get to know him, it's very different. But I was genuinely quite nervous about meeting him, and it turned out to be the nicest guy.
Yeah, it's always the way. I mean, a good example. I played a gig with William Bennett from the band White House a few years ago. And obviously they're supposed to be probably the most extreme band ever. An absolute pure gentleman. Had some great in-depth chats with him backstage. Just his personality live compared to what he is back, it's just totally different. But as I said, it's always the more extreme the music, the nicer the person is.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you end up leaving Earache? What led to that?
Well, I think I was kind of at the start. I mean, it was my dream job to start with, but then I had come from working in the bar trade in Ireland, and it was 80-hour weeks, but I was getting paid very well for it. So when you come from that, move to a different country, and all of a sudden you're getting paid really badly, but you are doing your dream, you kind of realize that you need to start learning more. And then I was at Download Festival around the table with Jeff Walker from Carcass and some other friends, and I got introduced to Steve Beattie, who runs Plastic Head Music Distribution. And we got chatting, got on like a house on fire, and he needed someone to take over their distribution, or digital distribution. They were just starting that up. So I gave him a call, and I got a full-time job there. And I was there for over 12 years. And during the meantime of that, like Candlelight Records was one of the labels that was in-house. And I started doing that for A&R for about 5 or 6 years before I got sold to Spinefarm.
And when you were doing A&R, what are some of the bands that you discovered? Because you obviously, if I think about what you're doing with your own label, you obviously have an ear for talent. I mean, an exceptionally well developed ear at that as well.
The first signing I did was Altar Plagues from Cork. I've also signed Meets of Asphodel, Coors, King Parrot from Australia, Woden's Throne, Zadatrev, Reverence, Non-Existence, Galvano, who now are Firebreather, signed to who are now Firebreather, who are touring with Mono Lord recently. Also signed, looking at my list, Blood of Kingu, which is Droot and members of Fate Forest, Eastern Front, Northern Tongues. Yeah, and fairly proud of all those artists.
And again, when you were, I guess when you started in A&R, because that was your first A&R job, right?
Yes.
So when you were starting in that, I guess, how did what you looked for in bands or what you listened out for in bands, how did that develop and evolve over time?
I always looked for a band with, firstly, I'd be interested in myself, had an interesting image, something about them, a bit more wholesome than just a few lads in a t-shirt and, metal t-shirt and jeans, whatever. Just something a bit odd, something different. Every single one of my artists I have signed they're a bit more unique. And then I kind of tried to bring that on to when I started signing stuff to my own level.
And so how did the decision come about to start your own label?
Well, after Candlelight got sold, myself and Darren, who used to do press for Candlelight, we decided to set up our own label. And we were thinking the whole plan was, because obviously all the main labels were either getting sold to big majors like Universal or Sony, or there just wasn't anything new coming through. So our idea was to kind of be middle ground. And then Darren ended up going to Spine Farm, so I ended up being left on my own because he didn't have the time to take stuff over. And obviously working on a major is just ridiculous. And we had a few bands signed, and then the first couple of years were quite tough. And then Tom Hubbard came involved. He used to be running a label called Carried Away, more hardcore kind of stuff. And he also was in the band Hang the Bastard. So they were signed to Century Media. So he had a lot of experience as well working with labels. And he's also in the band Crimson Throne, which we do. And so we both got on very well and decided to keep pushing the label, signing new bands, trying to get more homegrown from Ireland and England. And kind of the original plan, but trying to probably just get sign stuff that we want to listen to ourselves is probably the main thing we want to do. But also kind of build a community of artists that, we connect to each other, put on gigs, and become friends out of it.
So almost kind of like I don't know whether this is the best example, but back in the early mid 90s, you kind of have, in the hip hop scene as an example, you had Soul Assassins, which was like, a bunch of bands all signed to the same label, all doing tours together, and they sort of had their own community. That actually, funnily enough, as you mention it now, I always kind of got that impression with Apocalyptic Witchcraft as well. I discovered you guys as a label by hearing the first Antichrist Imperium album. And then in so doing, I sort of started discovering other stuff, and it was all very organic. I would sort of see something that Sam had shared on Facebook, or the Antichrist guys would have pushed on Instagram, or whatever the case may be. But it definitely seems like it is quite a sort of a close-knit community that you've created there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was also always the plan, but it kind of helped that we're very close with the guys from Cocker and Vices, and they have so many. I mean, they're so multi-talented and have so many amazing bands. So anything they wanted to put out, they come to us first. And it's great to actually trust us enough that it will come to us first.
Mm. What was the first release that you guys put out?
The Antichrist Imperium's first album was the first one that came out. Yeah.
And were you nervous before that came out?
Sorry, say it again? Were
you nervous before that release got put out?
I mean, we were working with we put out a lot of releases through Candlelight, so we kind of knew how, no, not really, to be honest. I mean, I had the experience, but it's also, you don't want anything going wrong, and particularly, like talking earlier, the Berserker and Ackercock are two very important bands for me growing up, so it's kind of, I'm working with my heroes now, so it's kind of, I had to do the best job possible and not mess it up, so I suppose there's a bit of pressure on, but the band seems very happy with it. It looks amazing. Everything about it turned out great. The press was fantastic. And I think it was a very good start to the label.
I mean, it's a superb start. And I think it sets the bar pretty high. But, and then if I think of some of my other favorite bands that you guys have put out, Crimson Throne is definitely one that comes to mind as well. I thought that last Crimson Throne album was absolutely sensational. And this track that they've put out on Bandcamp now, I thought was just as cool. Are they? I would assume they're busy with a new album, and it's kind of a taste of what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas is probably the best man to talk to about that, and you should interview him in the future because he's very interesting. But in general, they want to do more ambient stuff, but also do the black metal thing as well. So they just want to put out a lot of content, keep busy. I mean, they're touring every weekend. They're building their profile all the time. And next year, we'll probably do a split with them and my band From the Bogs by Kishka.
Yeah. So how has you guys have kind of got this or found this niche, which is both sort of it's UK centric, but obviously also with quite a heavy bent towards black metal. Again, I guess it's what are some of the challenges of running a label like that? Because a lot of musicians and a lot of record labels complain that people aren't buying music anymore, and it's really difficult to run a label. And then you're catering to a very, very specific niche, and a niche which I tends to be my preference as well, which is why I'm interested in what it's like, I guess, running that or managing that from the business side of things.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. I mean, this year particularly, we have released a lot of vinyl, and vinyl just isn't selling like it used to. in general, people aren't just buying as many records, and I think most of the people that do buy our stuff are like 35 plus. So it's not like when I was a kid, 15, whatever, spending all my pocket money on CDs. That just doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, it's definitely difficult from the business point of view. But I think the fact we're doing more, like going forward, we're going to try and look more into t-shirts and merchandising, and possibly put on a night in London once every month or whatever, once every 2 months or whatever, just to get people out, see the bands live. Yeah, it's definitely difficult, but people have to change with the way things are going.
What do you think it is about the generations that's kind of, I guess, changed the shape of how music is consumed so much? Because I agree with you, and again, I come from a place where even getting hold of music was an adventure in itself. So I think because you had to work so hard to get it, you appreciated it a lot more, and you attached a whole lot more value to it than I think kids do today. But what's your observation of why things have changed so much with the new generation?
It's just too easy to get stuff. Like you said, I remember being a kid, and it was impossible to get extreme music. You had to have a credit card to get it from England, or you had to send money over in envelopes, hidden envelopes. And then when you did get a CD, you just spent hours looking at the artwork, reading the lyrics, going through the Tanks list and seeing what other bands they hanged out, and then buying their CDs. And it was just a whole adventure. And now it's people can get music too easy, or you find something out. There's no journey for it anymore. So it kind of defeats the I don't know. It's kind of like the mission for the adventure of discovering music is kind of dead. So I think most people are more interested in listening to, I don't know, watching YouTube, people play games on YouTube or something. It seems to be more intriguing to them than actually discovering music. But also the fact is, I think there's too much stuff out there too much quality. So maybe people are buying stuff, but they're just buying too much other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, well, and that's true as well, of especially of the black metal scene. I mean, I listen to a lot of different kinds of music, and not just metal. But I will say, I think, in my opinion, as far as consistent quality and a consistent flow of fresh new bands that are doing amazing stuff is concerned, I personally don't think there's a genre that can hold a candle to black metal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm staggered by the amount of great music coming out in the black metal scene generally.
Oh yeah, this year particularly has just been. I mean, some bands are going 20 plus years and they're still releasing amazing records, like Bloodhouse Nord new album, for instance, or the Great Old Ones, or even the new Mayhem album, Solid. It's just constantly great stuff coming out, and interesting music. But more importantly,
well, see, that's the thing. I feel like when it comes to black metal in particular, I think a lot of bands have found a way to keep things very interesting. And I think if I contrast that to death metal, which I love a lot of death metal, and I especially love a lot of older death metal, but I feel like Carl from Nile recently made a comment and said a lot of death metal bands are stuck in the past. I think he's 100% right. I mean, I know he got a lot of flack for that, but I mean, there's so many bands that on paper I really like, and then I've heard their new album come. They'll bring out a new album, and I'll hear it, and I'll go, well, that sounds pretty good, but I'm never compelled to listen to it again.
Yeah.
I remember when I got the Crimson Throne record as an example. I mean, Jesus, I must have broken that in the space of about 3-4 weeks. It was a bit like going back to when I used to get music, where I would sort of spend, as you said before, you spend the entire day or the entire week just studying the booklet, looking at the lyrics, trying to find out about as much about the band as you possibly can. I feel like there's more of that in black metal now than there is in definitely in death metal, and pretty much in any other music genre.
Yeah, I think it's a music fans genre. It's, as you said, you have to go out and look for it. It's not easy listening. There's a lot there's a lot to search for, and it's not like you just have to turn up to a record shop and have to buy it. You have to find these bands. You have to find their Bandcamp. You have to contact them. So it's difficult. Maybe it's the difficulty that makes people more interested in it. There's also the death metal thing. I mean, I was a big fan of bands back in the day, but I feel like I've kind of grown out of it to a certain extent. I mean, I still love all the classic stuff, but as you say, certain new stuff comes along. You listen to it once, and then it might be good, but I'm not going to go back to it.
Yeah, for me as well, I'm not a big fan of the over technicality. I mean, I appreciate that it's incredibly difficult to play like that, but I would also, add to that what Matt from Antichrist Imperium does is equally technical, but I find it a lot more enjoyable because, in my opinion, it's more musical. More musical, and there's kind of more structured songwriting going on. And so therefore I can listen to like the last Antichrist Imperium album, and even after the first listen, and certainly after the kind of fifth and the 10th listen, you can remember songs very, very clearly, and you can remember the hooks in the songs very clearly. And I feel like a lot of modern death metal has lost that. And the albums, they sound cool, but they just go by in a blur. And at the end of it, you'd be hard pressed to remember a single track off the album.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there, they actually write songs as opposed to just showing off how well they can play their instruments. So there's a big difference.
Yeah. And, there are exceptions. I mean, I thought the new Nile album was really good. Everything I've heard of the new Cattle Decapitation so far is absolutely fucking crushingly good. But, it's just not, if I look at my top 20 for the year, which I've started to compile now because I'll do an episode about that, at some point in the not too distant future, the vast majority of it's black metal. And the crazy thing is how many bands are bands that I either discovered this year or that, are just brand new bands that have come out recently.
Yeah, definitely.
What, so given this kind of, I guess, abundance of quality, especially now, I guess signing bands, spotting talent, bringing bands into your label would be very different from what it was like when you were at Candlelight. Now what, how would you define an apocalyptic witchcraft band?
Firstly, I think they have to have their own sound, their own image. They have to be willing to work hard. They have to be sound people. Someone will get on with, someone will have a drink with. I think to start with that, you just have someone I'd like to hang out with and make good music, have intelligent conversations with. I think it's very important just to get on with someone on a personal level to start with. And obviously, if they're hanging out with us, then we'll have similar music taste. And I think we kind of have a good niche at this stage where everyone is a bit different, but they all sound a bit apocalyptic witchcraft.
Mm. And how does the role that a record label plays when it comes to, managing a band, working with a band, how does it differ in 2019 to, what it was like 20 years ago when you just got started?
Well, I think the main thing, you're still paying, you're still involved with someone who has an experience. Things like distribution, artwork, press, promotion, marketing, it's all fairly daunting if you don't know anything about it. And then that's where the label comes in. We help with that kind of side of things. Years back, I think it was so much more difficult for bands to do it themselves. I mean, bands can do it now themselves with Bandcamp particularly and things like that. But if they want to do it properly, they do need a press team behind them. They do need someone who has help with online marketing. It's so broad. It has changed an awful lot. It's so easier to get out there, and also it's harder to sell records.
And so what do you think is the, for any new band starting, what is the quickest route to kind of get their music out and get people listening? Would you say Bandcamp is the best?
Probably start off with Bandcamp, put your money together and do a decent video and put it up on YouTube, because YouTube is that's where everyone goes to find new stuff. From there, make sure you have decent logo. I think a good t-shirt design to start with. Just have the good imagery, everything to start with. There's no point just starting half-arsed, and then hoping labels will come on board, because if we see something like that, that's good music, but they're not going to make an effort. The photographs are crap. You just know it's going to be harder down the line. If it makes our job harder, it's going to be not worth doing, maybe.
Yeah, you mentioned shows earlier as well, and that's one thing I definitely feel has changed dramatically since I came to the UK. So I moved to the UK from South Africa in 2002, and I've spoken to people about this before. There used to be a real anticipation before a band came on stage, and I feel the quality of a lot of the shows, 10 years, 15 years ago versus now, was dramatically different. Bands were working a lot harder. There was a lot more energy and a lot more intensity on stage than there is now. I feel like nowadays there are too many bands, and I think it's particularly true of the newer generation, and not so much black metal, but certainly other styles of metal. The guys feel like it's okay for them just to stand on stage, almost like they at band, in the band rehearsal room, which for me is unacceptable. If I wanted to go, if I was going to pay to see a band, I want to see an atmosphere of some sort. I want to see a show. That's why I love what Abduction does. I like AV's idea of the bones and the hood and everything dark, and he doesn't necessarily have to be jumping around like a lunatic on stage, but there's something that draws me into wanting to see more. Versus, as you said right at the start of the interview, 4 guys in t-shirts just standing around staring at each other on stage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of our bands are fantastic live, and that's also another thing that's very important. I mean, what's the point paying money for someone who's just going to not make an effort? I mean, even if they do good music, you're going to go, why should I follow them around? I'm only going to see them once, they're grand, but I'm not going to go after them many times. I mean, as I was saying earlier on, the band that got me into extreme music mainly was the band called the Berserker from Australia, and they were wearing horrific masks before Slipknot were, and just generally insane. And I travelled to England when I was like 18 just to see them a few times, and it just blew my mind. But that's in my back of my head, just also seen something like that for the first time and going, yeah, that's absolutely terrifying. I want music to affect me and not not just be vanilla pointless stuff.
By the way, just on the topic of the Berserker, have you heard Sean and Matt's new project, Werewolves?
I've heard of it. I haven't checked it out yet, though.
Dude, it was okay. So I know what we were talking about. I was running down the death metal genre earlier, but fuck me, it is really, really good. Matt sent me a copy the other day, and I was blown away. Firstly, I can't believe that he and Sean could put that together in, I think it was like in the space of a week or something. They went and just as a joke, did a better death metal album than 90% of everything that came out this year, but it is fucking cool. And the one thing that I love about Sean's vocals, and I think he's almost become better at it as time has gone on, the way that he phrases and the way that he puts rhythm in his voice is just fucking unbelievable, because it almost creates like an extra hook on top of the music. You'll see what I mean. There's a track called Dog Knotted, and there's a bit where he talks about I don't know, something about transformation, but it just sounds so fucking awesome. It's a bit right before it's kind of a bridge right before the chorus, but you'll see what I mean when you hear it. But it's absolute genius.
No, I definitely need to check it out. It's just disgusting how talented those people are. It's such amazing music they're to create.
It's nuts. And I mean, again, like Antichrist Imperium, to me, the first album blew me away. And then the second album came out and I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe what these guys have done here. And I can't believe how they've managed to take so many different influences and throw it all together in a blender, and it all just kind of works. I mean, there's a part on the last album that could almost come out off a Dire Straits album. And it just works perfectly. So
very talented, and we should be releasing a new album by them next year. All going well.
Yeah, yes. So Sam was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned that they're working on a new album. So I'm dying to hear that. Absolutely dying to hear it. Now, so what is I guess what's your sort of big ambition, or the I wouldn't say the white whale, but the one thing that you really want to achieve with Apocalyptic Witchcraft that you feel that you haven't been able to do yet?
It'd just be great. I mean, one thing we do find that when bands sign with us, it's like, oh, can you get us on festivals? And at the moment, we do push them forward, but it is very hard. It'd be nice to be in a position where people go, oh, they're on Apocalyptic Witchcraft, they're obviously going to be good, we'll pick them for a festival. Something like that would be fantastic. Obviously, as a label, it'd be a dream just to pick the one band that just blows up, like a Death Heaven or something like that. But you never know. I mean, I'm very proud of everything we've released so far. The legacy, I mean, we're up to 30 releases nearly at this stage, which is amazing. And going forward, I'd love to be like where Eric were back when I was started listening to it. You had the cool logo. Anything that they released, I used to buy. It'd be great if we were kind of the same with that. You just knew you were getting quality by one of the releases. It has the Apocalyptic Witchcraft logo on it, is quality, so people buy it. But that time will tell if people actually keep up with it.
Well, you guys are one of those labels where I'd say Apocalyptic Witchcraft, Season of Mist, and Relapse are the three labels where I might not be a fan of everything, but when something comes out of that label, I'll immediately be interested in at least hearing what it sounds like.
No, that's exactly the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'd say at least 80% of what's on there is good. Now, excluding the Antichrist Imperium, because we could probably do a whole show about how much I love both those albums. But if you had to point anybody to quintessential Apocalyptic Witchcraft releases, what albums would you highlight?
Mortignia, that was released, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. That was incredible. Obviously, Crimson Throne. The new Kane album, fantastic. The new Damon record is really good too. Very technical if you're into more trashy death metal stuff.
Yeah,
with good songs.
The second guy I had on the show was Nathaniel Underwood. Yeah.
Stuff. I mean, there's lots of, like, we did a few vinyl releases which were obviously signed to other labels for, like, Zatrev and Crown and Turbine North. They're all solid, fantastic records. There's so many, to be honest. I think I'm very proud of everything we released, really.
Awesome, dude. So I'm gonna let you go. But thank you so much for being on the show. I guess the final question to anybody who's listening, who's in a band, who's unsigned, and either wants to get noticed by someone like you, what would be your advice to them?
Simply just drop us an email. Have your short biography, some music, not too many tracks, maybe just your 3 best tracks. Just a few points of what you want to achieve, what your plans are, if you're going on tour, just to give us an idea what it is. I mean, if you see us, any one of us at a gig, come up and talk to us. We're fairly sociable and easy to talk to. I think communication is probably the main thing. And it's one thing a lot of our labels, our artists say to us on the label, we're one of the few labels that they have worked with in the past that actually communicate with them, talk to them, answer emails, pick up the phone. So I think communication is the main thing.
Yeah. And what's the, conversely speaking, what's the worst thing that a band can do if they want to be noticed?
I suppose just spamming, adding you on Facebook, and then straight away sending you a link to their band without any communication or any information whatsoever.
Sending you a vial of goat's blood in an envelope.
Well, that's actually interesting. I mean, I used to get stuff like that all the time at Candlelight, but I mean, it is weird, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, you got that at Candlelight?
Yeah. I used to get like snake skin and bits of blood and razor blades and stuff like that with some of the demos.
Oh my God! Isn't there some urban legend around what Deicide used to send around with the Amon demos? I can't remember whether it was blood or whether it was something fucking disgusting, or whether Glenn had like wrapped the Amon demo in his underwear and sent it to Monty Connor. But there's some insane urban legend about what he did to get noticed. And I mean, not that they needed it, because they were getting noticed plenty at the time anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Did you meet them when you were at Iraq?
We did the Scars of the Crucifix. No, that had come out, and then I worked on the Redemption of Christ album, which is fantastic. But Ralph Santola played that one.
Yeah.
So I ended up meeting Glenn and Steve backstage, and I think it was the Mean Fiddler in London at the time. And they were fine. I mean, Glenn was friendly. He made me drink what was it, Jägermeister and Red Bull, a pint of that. That was his drink at the time. And, and then he was a rock star, but he was sound, in fairness. And then Steve was a really nice guy.
Well, so you mentioned people that have surprised you that you met. I ended up spending my 29th birthday getting drunk with Steve. When I was writing for Chronicles of Chaos, I went to meet him at a bar. I think it was the Intrepid Fox where we met, and it was when. I can't remember whether it was Talita that was doing PR for Iraq. But anyway, we literally did the interview for about half an hour, and then he's like, I don't have any other interviews to do. What are you doing? We just sat there drinking until about midnight. But yeah, one of the nicest guys. Same with Ralph. I wasn't sure what to make of him when we first started talking, and I think we ended up doing about a 2.5 hour interview, which at the time I was transcribing everything.
Yeah.
That was about a month's worth of work to get all that shit down. But such a funny guy, and it's such a shame that he's not with us anymore.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, I think a lot of those the bigger bands as well, they kind of put on a persona as like they think that's the way they should act, but then once you get behind the surface, they're just normal and cool.
Yeah, no, completely. Right, dude. Thank you so much. I am very much looking forward to anything else that you guys bring out in the future, and I really appreciate your time. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, and cheers. It's great to be appreciated.
Awesome, dude. Take care of yourself.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. thanks again to Conor for joining the show. Great to hear about the label. And as you can see, I am currently wearing an Apocalyptic Witchcraft t-shirt, which you can get on their website right now. And I will leave the link in the description. So check them out, buy their bands, buy their merch, and support a group of hard-working black metal promoting men. Anyway, on to what I am cranking this week. And the first album I want to talk about is available right now on Nuclear Blast. It is Strigoi. The album is called Abandon All Faith, and it features a young man named Greg McIntosh, who some of you may know as the vocalist and frontman of the now defunct Valenfire. And if Valenfire doesn't ring a bell, you will also know him as the guitarist of Paradise Lost. And if Paradise Lost doesn't ring a bell, then you have gotten lost on the internet and you are listening to the wrong podcast. Now, for some reason, Strigoi is kind of seen as a new band, a new start. I know that Greg wanted to sort of close off the Valenfire chapter after the last album that they put out. But I have to say, as much as I understand and I appreciate that he had personal reasons for wanting to do so, there is not really a huge amount of difference between Strigoi and Valenfire. Essentially, you're getting really filthy, crusty, heavy, old-school death metal with a sprinkling of doom on the top. And when I say doom, I mean the likes of the doom that Greg wrote for the first Paradise Lost album. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It is an exceptionally brilliant thing because Valenfire was awesome, and Strigoi just really continues where they left off. It is a record that hits really, really hard. It actually has Valenfire's bassist, Chris Casket, in as well, so just to kind of keep the familiarity going. But it hits hard from the off. There are some fast tracks. There are some slower tracks. For the most part, it just doesn't miss whatsoever. And I have to say, what an absolute tear Nuclear Blast have gone on. They've kind of been, or they, in my view at least, they flew under the radar a little bit as far as good releases were concerned. But I mean, just in the last month, the new Nile came out on Nuclear Blast. They put out The Despised Icon and now Strigoi. So kudos to them. Kudos to Strigoi for a fucking fantastic record. This is one of my favorite tracks off the album. It is called Carved into the Skin. Strigoi with Carved into the Skin of Abandon All Faith, which is out now on Nuclear Blast Records. And as with all the bands that I feature on the illustrious What I Am Cranking this week, I will post a link to that in the description of this video. So definitely check it out. It is an album I highly recommend. On now to the new Cattle Decapitation. And as I said in the intro, there seems to be a trend amongst some of the internet nerds to slate this album for just fairly kind of spurious reasons. So two main ones have come up, and I'll talk about them both because one I think is semi-justified, and the other I think is just completely absurd. The one that's justified is the fact that the band has moved away from kind of their death grind roots, and that is true. If you were expecting to listen to a record that sounded anything like To Serve Man or You Manure or even Karma Bloody Karma, then you're in for disappointment. I don't think the band is unrecognizable, purely because Travis's vocals are so incredibly distinct. But the kind of progression the band has been making, really, in my view, since the Harvest Floor, is very, very evident. And I think if you listen to the Harvest Floor, Monolith of Inhumanity, the Anthropocene Extinction, and Death Atlas in succession, I think you'll notice a very gradual progression that has led up to this album. But again, as I said, some of the folk I've heard, or some of the reviews I've read, have said that the record is lacking in riffs. Some people have called it boring. Some people have said that the character of the band has gone away, and I really don't agree with that whatsoever. And I know that's only an opinion, but I think the death metal and death grind and kind of technical side of the band is still very much intact. What you get added to it, and this ties into my comment around the second major criticism that I've read on the record, is a real sort of hint at black metal, but brought into the band in such a way that it's only ever a kind of a subtle undercurrent. It's never overpowering. It never sounds like the band has consciously moved into a completely different direction. But it's there. It is brought to life beautifully by Dave Otero's production, which I think is just absolutely sensational. And I think it also allows things like Travis's clean vocals, or goblin vocals, as I've heard it called, to really shine. And he uses those a lot on the new album, and he uses them to extremely good effect. But to comment on some of the criticism about that, when people start comparing Cattle Decapitation to Cradle of Filth, or the fucking dipshit from Angry Metal Guy who wrote a review saying that they're now a black metal band, I mean, they just don't know they don't know what they're talking about. It's as simple as that. They're not a black metal band. I don't think there's a single record or a single song on this record that you could point to that sounds like a full-blown black metal record. I mean, this doesn't sound like Marduk or Deathspell Omega or something like that, and it sure as shit doesn't sound like Cradle of Filth. It does, however, sound awesome. I love this album. I think for them to be 8 albums deep and to be making something that's challenging and consistent and interesting, I think really says a lot about this band and hopefully where the future lies for them. I think Travis's vocals are just absolutely spectacular. And like I said, I did mention Dave's production, but just everybody on this album just shines. I mean, the drumming is sick. The riffs are awesome. The grooves have given way slightly to some more melodic stuff and some more blasts, but they're still there. They're still memorable. Overall, I absolutely love the album. I could maybe have done without some of the interludes. There's a lot of these kind of soundscapes in between songs talking about the end of the world. But, I understand it's there for atmosphere, and in the interest of full disclosure, much as I love Cattle Decapitation and everybody from the band who I've seen interviewed seem like exceptionally nice guys, I will never be vegan or vegetarian in my entire life. So that's a point of difference, but that's what life is about. It's a difference of opinion, which I know is ironic given some of the fire that I just spat at a few folk. But I think you guys know what I mean. I would highly recommend this record if you're a fan of Cattle Decapitation and if you're a fan of the journey they've been on over the last couple of years. last couple of albums. It's definitely a record worth listening to, and in my opinion, one of the highlights of 2019. This is one of my favorite tracks off the album. It is called "With All Disrespect." That was With All Disrespect by Cattle Decapitation off the awesome Death Atlas album. It is available right now on Metal Blade, and in my opinion, one of the highlights of the year. But let me know what you think. Drop a comment, send me a message on either Facebook or Instagram, and let me know whether you agree with me or whether you think that I'm full of shit and Cattle Decapitation should actually change their name to Cradle of Filth 2. Anyway, I could not finish off today's episode without mentioning one band that is actually on Apocalyptic Witchcraft Records. We spoke about them earlier. The band is called Crimson Throne, and I think I might have mentioned them a couple of times in the past. In my opinion, one of the absolute best bands, or best black metal bands at least, in the UK right now. Their debut album, of Void and Solitude, is about 13 months old, and it's the kind of record that I would describe as expansive, atmospheric, grim, cult, punishing, and plenty heavy, especially when it needs to be. So there's tons of variation on here. This band plays like a band that's been around for 5 or 6 albums, not one. And really, in terms of kind of recent black metal in the last maybe 5 years, I can't remember a more intense and more interesting debut. So I would highly recommend that you check it out. Like I said, the album is called A Void and Solitude. This is one of my favorite songs of the album. It's called Scattered. That was a song called Scattered off a record called Of Void and Solitude, the debut by the UK black metal soon-to-be sensations, Crimson Throne. Like I said, an absolutely fantastic debut and one that I highly recommend. It's available on Apocalyptic Witchcraft, and really go do yourself a favor and check out their Bandcamp and their website. Show them some love and some support because they really do deserve it. And thank you again to Conor for coming on the show. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. And thank you for the support that I've had over the last 14 episodes, which continues to grow and continues to get better. And hopefully I can reciprocate with a couple of absolutely awesome episodes next year. I've got quite a few exciting things I'm working on that I want to be able to announce in the upcoming weeks, but I don't want to jinx anything, so I'll keep quiet for now. What I can announce, however, is that next week Giuseppe from Corpsing is going to be making his triumphant return, and we will begin the epic countdown of my favorite albums of 2019. There may be a couple of titles in there that you recognize. There may be a couple of titles in there that you want to hate on me for not putting it up higher. Maybe you're a band and I left out your new album, in which case you are preparing a death threat that you're going to send to my house. Either way, it's going to be a hell of a show. Until then, have yourself an absolutely killer week. From the mean streets of Surbiton on the outskirts of London, I am bidding you a fond farewell.